So hello, Steve, Orich, welcome.
Hi guys, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Where to quote Steve at the beginning of the call, it's about fucking time.
I didn't know how this was R-rated or not, but go ahead. Sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh my God,
Of course.
This is Jersey, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
We're very with the brand, absolutely.
Yes, genuine Jersey language, as they say.
Exactly. It's like on the sign outside I don't know if it's out. Can't recall now if it's outside New World Stages, but outside the August Wilson, it's like the show. It's has strobe lights and gunshots and language. So
Yep.
Yes, they do that at all the productions, just so in case someone brings their kids, it's like cover their ears.
what's so amazing is so many actors from the crews have told us that, like, people are just, sometimes they walk out because, first of all, on the cruise they think it's like, that kind of audience thinks it's like a cover band,
Right.
but then they see certain things, they hear certain things, like, okay, this is
It's shocking,
yeah,
especially with
shocking.
Smart,
Exactly.
Sure.
So
Well, I'll tell you a quick story. So I mean, I know we're going to talk about the show and talk about the album as well. When we did the album, which was, we started rehearsing it after we did La Jolla in the summer and the fall of 2004. Amazing, which was supposed to be a 5-week run, opening in October. We ended up running till the end of January. Then we went into rehearsal the following August for Broadway, but at the same time we were rehearsing the album, which was a little bit different because the record label wanted the album in the stores before the show opened. So the cast rehearsed for a week or two, and then they recorded the album, and then they went back to rehearsals. So I was there for the album. The album had a much bigger band. The album, I had a whole string section. I had extra guitars. I had an extra percussionist. There was a lot of stuff that was very different there. So the album orchestrations were different from La Jolla and also different from the actual show. So we finished recording, and I was living in California back at that time. I was ready to head back to California to finish writing the orchestrations for the Broadway show. And Bob Gaudio comes to me and says, I haven't been in the studio for about 10 years. Would you mind staying with me and mixing the album?
Oh.
Would I mind? So it was me. It was me and Bob and our engineer, Pete Karam, and the three of us. And we worked 16 hours a day for 2 weeks mixing the album. People came in, Ron came in, of course, after rehearsal because he was there during the day, and other people as well. But we basically mixed the album, the three of us. While we were close to releasing it, they said, we don't know if we're going to be allowed to use the F word on the album. So we did a whole mix of all the dialogue, bleeping out all the F words. So that was the alternate mix of the album. And said, we don't know, we'll have to see what the record label wants to do. Ultimately, they said, fuck it, put it in. So they did.
Wow. So two follow-up questions with that. This is fascinating. So why did you want to have more instruments in the cast recording?
A lot of cast recordings do that because it's going to sound bigger, it's going to sound fuller, and it's the permanent record of we didn't know if the show was going to last. We figured we want to make this sound as good as possible. When we did it at La Jolla, we only had 2 keyboards, and we only had 1 trumpet and 1 reed player, and the guitar, bass, and drums. So when we went to Broadway, it became 3 keyboards. We had the extra guitar, and we added the extra reed player. But for the album, we had 5 horns. We had 2 trumpets, 2 trumpets, 2 saxes, and a trombone, and the big string section for several of the arrangements as well, and a separate percussionist playing timpani and other things as well as everybody else. Yeah.
Okay.
Love the tips.
We love the tips. So you had another question?
I did. So yeah. I'm just curious, what does mixing mean exactly? Because I know people hear different definitions.
Sure. So these days, an album can have 24 or 48 discrete tracks with every instrument on an individual track. So you have a big mixing board, and you set levels, you set balance, you set equalization, you set compression, you set different kinds of reverb, and you balance those things out and you mix them. It's a little bit like orchestrating because you're moving the levels around and hearing it in perspective. So that was it. And being together, we both had input as far as what was going on. Oh, you know what? I need a little bit more trumpet there, or no, pull that one back. It was that sort of thing. And it's a very complicated, very tedious. It can be a very tedious process. And it's a matter of your ears and preference. And there's so many variables involved, but collectively, that's what makes the sound that you hear on any recording.
Wow.
Would you say that mixing, did it kind of come to you naturally over the years?
Sure. Well, you know, it's interesting. One of the questions that I know you're going to ask me about synth programming.
Mm-hmm.
Back very, very early, I took a course at the New School in synthesizer technology. And this is back in the 70s when really people weren't doing this. And it was a synthesizer probably 8 feet wide by 4 feet high with lots of patch cables. And with all of that, you could make one sound. But what that taught me was understanding the audio spectrum as far as frequencies, as far as understanding different kinds of waves, different envelopes, attack, decay, and release envelopes. And that helped me understand instrumentation, helped me understand orchestration, because in orchestration, there are frequencies from low frequencies to high frequencies, and you need to know what instruments are in what place. Like, for instance, if a vocal range is here, which is about 1K, 2K, which is 1,000, 2,000 kilohertz, then usually you will write other instruments below it in a lower range or above it, because if you write in the same range, it will overlap and the sounds will fight each other. So it's knowing the whole audio spectrum, and that's also involved in orchestration and in mixing. There's a lot of overlap there.
So I guess when it comes to writing the charts, for our listeners, sometimes there are different words for orchestrations for music. Sometimes it'll be called a chart. Sometimes it'll be called an orchestration, just so you know. It's kind of interchangeable.
Absolutely.
Everyone go to Steve Orich's website, because he has every single frequently asked question that you could ever think of when it comes to the music business, music, composing, orchestrating, producing a musical, what you need to know, go there. It's amazing. And he talks about the interchangeable work. So when you're writing, when you were writing the charts for Jersey Boys, especially when, because Frankie's falsetto, did you kind of, maybe not challenging, but did you kind of have to straddle a line with his range and the range of the instruments you were writing for?
Absolutely. I would never, I mean, because of where his range is sort of like a medium flute or a high guitar range. And I would never write something in that range right where he's singing. So I would write above it or below it. But of course, yeah. Again, the whole audio frequency spectrum.
Yeah.
Right.
So going back to the cast recording for a second, because so you said you had a live string section.
Yes, we had 12 strings, and I think we used it on 3 or 4 songs. Not on the whole show.
Beggin has strings. So
I know we use it on My Eyes Adored You. I have to go back.
Oh, Can't Take has strings.
Can't Take, of course, yeah. And I.
Fallen Angel? No.
Not Fallen Angel.
Right, so
Maybe.
Now you're making me want to look. So give me a second. I'll look it up.
My God, he's looking at his charts. It's amazing.
Because I have every chart I have ever written for. I have charts from the album, from Australia, from Broadway, Broadway on Broadway, the cruise, the other events that we did, other places, the La Jolla scores, the London scores, arrangements I wrote for the National Symphony, for the David Letterman Band, for the Tony Awards, for Stars in the Alley, for Vegas production, everything. I have radio spots, I have all this stuff. So if I'm looking at the album scores,
what a hard
and
to be a fly.
What a hard drive you would need to store everything.
It's all on Dropbox, so it doesn't die. So yes.
to be a fly on the wall in Steve Orich's office.
Well, you're gonna see it here. I mean, I'll take you around. I'll give you a tour. It was Fallen Angels, Fallen Angel, Can't Take, My Eyes Adored You, and the last one I'm guessing was Who Loves You.
That's
So
what I
those
was
are the
gonna
four.
say.
So
Yeah.
Megan's not there.
Oh, what about Beggin?
No,
No, you know what? Why did I say Beggin? I was
Beggins not a string heavy song. It's mostly about horns and that. Yeah.
Exactly. Which keyboard is playing the strings in the show?
For the most part, it's, and I don't know if it's 1, 2, or 3. There's the conductor, then there's the female keyboard, and I don't know which is 1 or 2, but the third one, which is the one on stage, the one that Hoops played, that is mostly, he does almost all the strings in that. And he was so sensitive, and in the way he played things, it felt so emotional and heartfelt. He was just a master at doing that.
Wow. There's so much to unpack
He's
here.
wanted to know that answer for years.
Because if I recall correctly, I think the third keyboard conducts.
The conductor, there's the conductor chair, there's the female chair who ends up being on stage. And that was Deborah's part originally. And then there's the third keyboard who is on stage most of the time and not in the pit.
Right.
And Deborah, what was Deborah's last name?
Deborah Hurwitz was
Deborah Hurwitz, yes, of course.
Yeah, and but Deborah Barsha,
Deborah Barsha took over for her, yes, of course.
Yeah, and so when you were, so I guess switching over to the keyboard programming, we'll stay with that for a second. Were you guys using MainStage when you were creating? Or was
So
that back then?
here's the story. When we did the show at La Jolla, I programmed all the keyboards myself.
Okay.
I was the only programmer. And I did it on Kurzweil keyboards because that's what I'd been using, and I was pro at that and made all these sounds and did everything and programmed 2 Kurzweil keyboards, which they used at La Jolla. Time to move to Broadway, and we say, well, let's get 3 Kurzweil keyboards. Just at that time, Kurzweil was being purchased by another company, Young Chang, and there were no keyboards available. They stopped producing them and stopped releasing them. We couldn't buy any.
No.
And I was only used to programming on Kurzweil, and they said, well, we can't use them. So we said, well, we need to get something else. And Deborah says, well, I have a big role in the library. So we said, okay, so we'll do that. So Deborah and I curated through her library. So that's why we had the co-credit. It was my original programming, but when we went to Broadway, my keyboards weren't available. So she came in and did it with me.
So in every single Jersey Boys orchestra, there are Roland keyboards?
No,
Okay.
because then that changed later on because MainStage wasn't even available then. It wasn't out then. It wasn't until not even the first tour, not even, it may have been either a second tour or when they moved to New World Stage that they reprogrammed it for MainStage. Before that, the early tours were using the same Roland equipment.
Roland keyboards.
Right. But
Okay.
what's kind of interesting, so I manufactured all those sounds. One sound in particular has survived that I made in 2004 that is still in every production, and it's in Oh What a Night, that rocket takeoff sound that goes. I created that sound from scratch, and I put that in, and that actual wave file that I created has survived through all the productions.
That's
Wow,
amazing.
that's awesome.
So you said Ron Melrose brought you onto the team. So because
Let me back up.
Yeah.
Ron and I met when we were both in our early 20s.
Okay.
Neither of us can remember who, we both know that one of us was playing auditions and the other one came in to play for somebody else, and we liked each other's playing. And what people would do back then, they'd exchange cards, which we did, and we became pals. And we got together with both of our ex-wives. Now we both have new wives, and we've been together with them also. But we used to hang out together and see each other. And then I moved to LA, and actually while we were in New York, Ron passed me a lot of work. He wrote a show called Tots in Tinseltown, which he gave me to orchestrate. So I orchestrated that. I worked on many early projects with him. But then I moved to LA. in the mid 80s, and there was no email then, but we would correspond by mail. We would write letters to each other. We'd make phone calls just to keep in touch. And then I was coming to New York to supervise some auditions for a production I was doing in LA. And I, as I often did, I said, hey, Ron, I'm coming to New York. He says, oh, good. He says, I want to talk to you about something. So we got together and we had dinner, and he pitched Jersey Boys to me. And he said, it's a little show. It's only going to be 5 weeks. You have to orchestrate, you have to copy all the parts, and you have to program all the synths. And actually, he wrote down the details on a napkin in the restaurant, and I still have the napkin from exactly what that was. So, and from there, and and I said, it sounds good, I'll let you know tomorrow. And then I went home and I called my wife, and my wife comes from a rock and roll background. She was, her ex was was a rock star, so she was connected to that whole thing. And I said, I got this music, the Four Seasons. She said, when I was a kid, I had the chicken pox, and my grandpa bought me a record player, and he bought me 2 45s, and one of them was Sherry. You have to take this show. And I said, okay.
Wow.
And actually, she told that story to Frankie on opening night and in La Jolla.
No way.
Stars are in
Yeah.
alignment.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Destiny
So that's a big job for a show that you think is only going to be 5 weeks.
But you know what? You never know with these things. And I've worked, whatever you're working on, you give it your all. You give it 1,000%, because you want to put your imprint on it, and you never know what's going to happen. You work on something and it'll die in a week, or it'll go on for decades like this has.
So so just because we don't know exactly how the process of orchestrating is like, and so Ron, what were the discussions like between you, Ron, and Des when you were creating the orchestrations?
Got it. So I did not have a lot of discussions with Des, because Ron was working with Des much more closely. So he got the input from Des and then gave it back to me. But Ron and I talked about, what do we want to do? We listened to these early recordings, and our rubric of what we thought, how we wanted to approach this show was make it sound like the originals, only better. On a lot of the originals, there were no horns, we put horns on there. There were no strings, we put strings on there. A lot of the originals, they were in mono, and they were at very slow tempos. We picked them up, we made them more lush and more interesting, and Ron restructured the numbers to make more sense, obviously in the context of the show. And that was our approach. The other thing was that we were essentially given a band, most of the band at La Jolla. Ron said, Des has this band that he plays with. It's called the Red Dirt Band, that he plays with them in La Jolla, and he wants them to play the show. And we didn't know if they read music. We didn't know if they were good, if they were bad. But Ron interviewed them, and it was Joe Payne on guitar. It was Steve Hoop Snyder on keyboard, and it was the Dow brothers, Kevin and Ken, on bass and drums. And Ron said, they're phenomenal. So we were given the keyboard, bass, drums, and guitar. Ron was playing the other keyboard and conducting, and they said, you get 2 more, what do you want? And I said, a trumpet and a reed doubler, so which made the most sense. Yeah.
The whole horn section.
Yeah.
When you're writing out a drum chart,
Mhm.
it's so, because I feel like, I don't know, maybe this is ignorant of me, but I feel like reading a drum chart is some of the hardest music reading to do, because it's not like you have clefs, different clefs that you can read from and everything. It's like one, I don't know. So how much, I guess this is kind of a general question but from an orchestrator's point of view, how much liberty or freedom does a drummer have when they're playing a chart?
That's actually a really good question. First of all, I will tell you, one fortunate thing is that when I was in elementary school, I played drums.
There you have it.
So that made a difference. And writing drum charts is very subtle and very delicate, because You don't want to underwrite and you don't want to overwrite. You want to give them the basic parameters and then they can take some liberties. The thing about Jersey Boys, which is different from pretty much every other show that I've ever done, is that, hang on, I'm just looking for something to show you. No, that's not it. That's different from every other show that I've done is that because it goes from the 50s through the 90s, it's very specific and they can't do a drum, you can't do a 90s drum fill on a 50s chart. So all the fills are very specific as far as what's there, and the musicians are worked with very carefully and very specifically. You can't play out of bounds. You have to play exactly as written. There's as we were developing it with Ken, we would talk about, okay, we can take a little more freedom there or a little more energy, but basically within the same boundaries. I mean, you give them the feet for the kick drum and for the hi-hat pedal, and then you give them the snare and the cymbals and the toms. You tell them exactly what to play, and it's all written out there.
When we're dealing with the on-stage musicians,
right?
In Bandstand, in that musical, the on-stage musicians were given specific charts to learn. So how did you guys approach the on-stage musicians and like?
Well, it fortunately, when they cast them, the original guys were the guys who played the Four Seasons outside of the Frankie Valli character were all real musicians. Daniel Reichert, who played Bob Gaudio, asked me for the piano charts for Sherry and those other ones that was being played in the pit. And he had those and he learned them and played them. And Bobby Spencer learned the entire bass book completely from start to finish. He had every single note. If you had turned up his volume, he would have played every single note throughout the entire show when he's on, because he mimed it, and he mimed it perfectly on the right notes because he was a bass player. And Christian was playing guitar. Sometimes it was on, sometimes it was off, but he sort of built his own part, because when we did it at La Jolla, we only had one guitar in the pit, so that was a secondary guitar that he played just to fill things out on occasion.
Okay.
Well, that's so cool with Bobby and Daniel. So we had a few, we spent a lot of time with Bobby last year. We did a fundraising event with him, and we had a separate interview with him, and we had one with him and Miles Aubrey. And yeah, but he never told us that. I'm so surprised.
I got to tell you, from being with him and, doing the show first at La Jolla and then on Broadway and doing the album and then being with him for so many years and back and forth and events and things like that, we all became so close. We were really, it was such a real family, and I missed them. I saw them. So here in Sarasota, they have a group called the Midtown Men.
Yes.
So they came and performed here a couple of years ago, and I contacted them and I went to see the show, and it was at the Van Wezel Theater, which is a big auditorium there, a couple thousand seats. And they were doing the show and they stopped in the middle and they said, we want to introduce somebody. And they paid me this gorgeous high praise saying, this is somebody who was instrumental, no joke, in creating everything that we came from, blah, blah, blah. And they introduced me, put a spotlight on me. So it was a great, a lovely, warm situation. They're all really good guys. And Michael Longoria also, yeah.
Like I always say, the way in for me was through the music. And I always think of one particular orchestrator, Bill Brown, William Brown, rest in peace, wrote some of the most amazing orchestrations for some of the the world's most beloved musicals, including Wicked and Mary Poppins and Ragtime. And I always come back to his shows. And I just recently learned that he wrote the orchestrations for Mary Poppins. The beauty of and this is just the way I see it, the beauty of his orchestrations, he takes two completely different worlds and which often relate to two different forces within that show, and he puts them together in this most seamless way. Like in Wicked,
this is amazing.
This is amazing. It's one of the most amazing. In Wicked, you have the symphony orchestra mixed with the rock band.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like, you know, Elphaba represents the rock band, which is like grungy, which is different. And then the symphony orchestra represents Glinda, who's posh and proper, and everything goes her way except when it doesn't go her way. And then the orchestrations for Glinda kind of sound a little different once she becomes Glinda from Glinda, her music starts sounding different. And once
Right.
Elphaba becomes the woman that she was meant to become, her orchestrations sound a little bit different. Two different things, and he puts them together.
It's the foil. It's amazing.
And with Mary Poppins, you have this beautiful symphony orchestra. And then whenever the wind is changing, whenever changes are happening, you hear an electric guitar. And it's like, this is just, I almost want to start crying because this is just so amazing. And so
let me tell you something here, that I've worked in film and television and theater and industrials, in almost every form of entertainment. And of all of those, musical theater is the most collaborative because everyone puts a piece in. So it's hard, it's impossible to say whether that was Bill's idea or suggestion, or whether it was Stephen Schwartz, because I know Stephen very well. We worked together several times, and he is a consummate musician. He will say, I want this, and he will request that. Or it could have been the music director who said, oh, I have an idea. It could have been the choreographer. It could have been the director. Everyone has a say when you're collaborating on a piece like that.
Exactly. And to always bring it back to Jersey Boys, horns all over the place, from the top, from accessoire, Broadway's ultimate fake out, as Ron coins it. And it's like, it's almost like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy right from the start, and you don't even realize it. And I think that's just so genius by the entire creative team and the music team and everything. And it's like, it's almost like I'm always trying to see like two things and push. I'm always trying to see that. It's like my interpretation of it is like the rock band in Jersey Boys is like, you know, that's them, that's the nitty gritty, that's the old neighborhood, that's their music. And then the horns represents what they want to be.
Right, but then you also have things like, you have the timpani, you have chimes, you have these sounds. I mean, I don't know if you know this story, but Bob Gaudio told us that they would go, I think that it's alluded to in the show someplace, where they go into the studio and Sunday things were closed. So they record on Sunday, and whatever instruments were left over there, they would use them. That's how they got the instrument called the hair drum, which is what they use for, was it Dawn? I'm not sure which song it was, but it was something that he used the hair drum on. And also they used the chimes, they used whatever was available, they put on the recording.
Right.
And even the timpani.
Yeah.
How did the because the timpani is used in very, very specific moments. When we were talking with Ron, we kind of did a lightning round of the 20 minutes between Stay and Come On Marianne. And there's one specific moment that that we kind of missed during I'm always forgetting. You're the one girl in town I'd marry. Yeah. What's Bye Bye Baby.
Yeah.
Oh my God, of course. So the music becomes a lot faster because it's like the ship that's kind of like rocking Frank.
There's a goose in the tempo right on that song, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So on the timpani going from the E to the A in the verse there. That moment just creates sort of a grounding in a time that's really shaky and everything. So it's like, even though he's, you know, crawling all over the map like a cockroach, there's still some constant in his life, and that's the music. And the relationships are knocking him all over the place. He's going from woman to woman. His daughter is making him nuts.
Mhm.
Mary's driving him up the wall. Tommy is still ruling his life, even though he's not there, but there's some sort of grounding.
Yeah, Bob
there.
doesn't want to perform on stage
Yeah,
anymore.
everyone's
Yeah.
leaving.
Yeah.
But the timpani kind of, whenever the timpani comes in, it's like encouraging moments, or even really that like during right before begging. So that's an explosive, like close to an explosive moment, but something is keeping him going. And then
Sure.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, yes, you can read all these subtle things into it, or sometimes a duck is just a duck. And before begging, it's an introduction. You can have
Yeah.
so
Right.
if that wasn't a conscious thing, it was just that we're thinking of his grounding. We're just like, okay, you need a timpani, you got a timpani going into the song and start. So sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes we create stuff that we don't even know what we create, but if it works on whatever levels for you, then we're all happy.
Yes, and I think honestly that is what this entire podcast is about. Is us we're getting into it. Usually, oh yeah, that makes sense.
That
You
makes
know,
sense.
like, it's,
Didn't intend that, but sure.
so
Let's call
funny.
it what it is.
Yes, and Daveed says this all the time. Like it feels like when you and the creative team, like well, including all of you as a creative team, were working on Jersey Boys, you were all at the top of your game.
Yeah.
And of course you still are. But like, did it feel like you were reaching that point with yourself?
You know, once we opened on Broadway, it did.
Yeah.
Because of the accolades that we got from that, and from everyone saying, oh my gosh, you've created something special. Before that, you do your best, you just try, and you never really know what's going to happen, because it's based on reviewers, it's based on luck, it's based on timing. And there had been a couple of jukebox musicals before us, and Mamma Mia was successful, and several others were drastically unsuccessful. There was one for the Beach Boys, and also one of Johnny Cash music, and they were both like within the year before us, and they didn't work. But ours worked, and I think a lot of it is because, bottom line is, it's the book. Jersey Boys would be a fantastic show if you take out every note of the music, because it's got a wonderful script, it's got a wonderful story. The music just brings it up a level and connects it all together.
Right. Thank you, Ricky.
Yes, of course. The first time, so when I was orchestrating the show, I was living in LA, and they were in La Jolla, which is about a 2-hour drive. So Ron would send me stuff, I'd work a little, then I would drive down and I'd stay there for like 3 days and watch rehearsal, and then go back and write. So I went back and forth over the 5 or 6 weeks of rehearsal. But the first time I came down there, I walked in and they were rehearsing, and the first song I saw was My Eyes Adored You. And I'm watching Frankie on stage right, and his wife on stage left, and I'm standing there, and the tears start streaming down my face. The very first scene I ever watched, because wait, this is happening to them, and that's the song, and oh my gosh, it was a little like Kristen Wiig's character on SNL, like, oh my God. It felt like that kind of moment, like it's all happening at the same time. It was overwhelming. It really was.
That's the perfect metaphor for that. Oh my God, that's so funny.
Yeah.
I can picture that.
Yeah.
So that leads to a question. Do you pop in to like to different rehearsals, like for the tour or for a UK production or Australia or anything?
I did for Broadway. I was there for the entire time for the rehearsal period, and then afterwards and previews and whatever. When the first tour opened, it opened in San Francisco, and the opening, I know because it was my daughter's birthday, it was on December 10th, 2006. La Jolla was the summer of 2004. We opened in November of 2005. We won the Tony in June of 2006, and the tour opened that December. And it opened in San Francisco, and I got a call asking me to come up to help them out as far as mixing and working with sound and the band. So I was up there for a week, and I stayed there for a while. After that, I really wasn't necessary, because Ron handles all of that, and he handles it brilliantly. So if there was ever a question or a problem, he'd come to me, and there are other things that I've had to do. For instance, When we went to Toronto, they could not find a reed player who could play oboe and sax. They just didn't have one. So I had to rewrite the oboe book to work on a clarinet. When they went to London, the London Musicians Union has a rule that no one can play more than, I think it was 3 or 4 instruments. And our guitar player played 6 or 7 guitars, acoustic, electric, 12-string Strat, and also the electric sitar. So I had to divide the book into 2 guitar books. And that's when I wrote a complete second guitar book for the show. And then that ended up being on Broadway and used on tour, that they used the second guitar. But it was because of London that I wrote that second book.
Wow. How long did it take to write that second book?
You know, I don't know. I can't put it into hours or days. I pick it up, I work, I stop, I work, I stop, and when it's done, I give it in. So I don't
Right,
know.
of course.
I don't measure the time.
So, as an orchestrator, what do you feel your primary job is, and how do you feel you can be creative with that?
On a deadline.
Yeah, well, you know, having worked in LA in television where the deadlines are insane, and basically, I mean, I would do TV shows where you know that for 2 days or sometimes 3 days in a row, you would not sleep because you have to work all the way through in order to get it done, because you have to hand it in on Monday because it's going to be on the air on Wednesday night. So those are deadlines, and I've never missed a deadline. I do what I have to do, and you do what you have to do to get it done in time. Your question was, about my job as an orchestrator. You know, I worked in a lot of different capacities. I started out as a keyboard player, playing in shows on Broadway. I've conducted shows, I've composed, I've orchestrated, I've arranged, I've music supervised, I've done synth programming, I've contracted. I mean, I've done absolutely everything. The job of the musician is to make the actor look good and to make the show sound the best you can. That's it. So you do whatever you can to make that work. I mean, and you know, even in a situation where when you're conducting a show and something goes wrong, you need to make the actor look good and follow him and change it and do whatever you have to do. You want to give the actor, you want him or her to do the best they can do, and you want the audience to have the best experience as an audience member, because they're paying a lot of money, they're getting a babysitter, they're only seeing the show one time, and you want it to be a great experience for them.
So, you know, it's interesting. When I saw Motown, the musical, the conductor, his score was closed and sitting on the side. He wasn't even looking. So I mean, at the time I was like, wow, this guy really either has memorized the entire show or so intimate with the catalog of the Motown, you know, the music in the show. And
here's the thing, you play a show 8 times a week, you're going to memorize it. Every show I've ever done, after a month, you have it completely memorized. A friend of mine just subbed in Jersey Boys at New World Stages, and she said, wow, the guitarist never opened his book. And I said, of course, it's Steve Gibb. He'd been playing it on Broadway for years, and he has it completely memorized. So that's not as unusual as it seems.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and we were reading on your website how, like, because it was getting a little monotonous for you on Broadway, so that's why you wanted to head out to LA.
Yes.
So if we could talk about your LA experience a little bit deeper with certain things that you've worked on.
Sure, absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, American Idol, The Tonight Show, the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade, the Oscars, the Tonys, like sitcoms galore, like that's incredible. So is it all referrals? How you got those jobs? At least at the beginning.
You know, every job is a connection.
Yeah.
So I'll back up. So when I was in New York and I was playing keyboards and I just was getting bored, and a friend of mine said, oh, there's this orchestrator who's teaching now I went to school at Stony Brook. I also took courses at Manhattan School of Music. I also studied film scoring, bless you, film scoring at UCLA. So I've studied quite a bit, but there was a teacher, a man named Don Sebesky, who is spectacular orchestrator. Tony winning, he did Parade, he did Kiss Me Kate, the one about 15 years ago, just incredible. And he was teaching a course in orchestration, a year-long course. He has a very famous book called The Contemporary Arranger that everybody uses. So he taught from his book, and he's one who really opened my ears to hear things that I couldn't hear before. And I realized I'm not just a piano player anymore. I mean, I had been a composer. I took the BMI Musical Theater Workshop and I got accepted as a composer and lyricist with Lehman Engel, and I did that back when I was in New York also. But I was more interested in composing for TV and film and also orchestrating, which there's a lot of overlap in both of those. So I went to LA, and the first job I did was the first big job I did was working on the Academy Awards, because I knew the choreographer from New York, and he knew I was out there. Told him blah, blah, blah. Hey, you want to come play rehearsals? Yes, I did. And I did some arranging for that as well. And then moving on from next, and people hear about you and you get to know, and things work out.
Of course.
I started out, I did do one sitcom, a show called Babes that was on Fox. And that was really the most harrowing one, because literally on Thursday at about 6 o'clock, I would have a messenger deliver a VHS tape of the show on my doorstep. And I would stay up all night Thursday and Friday. I put together 22 minutes of music for whatever was needed, and then mixed it, recorded it in my studio. And Monday morning, I panned in the tape, they put it in the show, and then it was on the air a couple days later. The first, you asked me about this on the previous questions. The first big Hollywood gig that I had of prestigious was conducting the orchestra for Very Brady Christmas. I wrote orchestrations and I conducted the orchestra. So to get hired, and this was because I knew the composer, who was Sherwood Schwartz's son-in-law, and he was a very capable composer. He played with Wings. He's done, and he actually tours. He tours quite a bit now as a solo guitarist. He's a wonderful musician, but he brought me in, and because he was not a conductor, and he said, "Can you conduct?" I said, "Sure," and absolutely, we talked about it. I had like a 40-piece orchestra there, and then he said, "Well, here's some extra orchestrations. I don't have time for this," so I wrote some orchestrations as well and put that together. But to be in, that was at the studio at Paramount Studios, to have a studio where the studio itself is like $1,000 an hour, and you have 40 musicians, each of them making $100 an hour, and I'm on the clock, and if I don't get it done in time, it's on me. And I was great with it, and just talking to them and communicating and listening, and that was really great. And actually, after we did Very Brady Christmas, there was a short-lived series called The Bradys, which was an hour-long dramatic series, and I did that as well. Wow. And I would go in, and every 2 weeks I had the gig where I would go to Universal Studios and have a 40-piece orchestra in front of me and conduct, put it together. Yes, we're done. Okay, move on. That was really thrilling. Besides that, I've had a few others like that as far as television and film experience, but most of the stuff I did was of a smaller budget, which means I would do it in my home studio, which was at the time not the kind of equipment where right now I have everything on a laptop. There I had racks of computers and racks of synthesizers and recording equipment, and I would bring in people to play and mix and did the whole thing myself.
Wow. So so when you were doing those home orchestrations, so you would bring in other people to play some of the instruments?
Sure, and it really it's not just orchestration. There's a lot of overlap. I was a composer, so I would be composing music for television and orchestrating it, arranging it. It's all the same thing, as you do it. And sometimes it was just me with, multiple tracks of synths, or sometimes they say, I'd bring in a string section, or I'd bring a sax player to add to give some realism to what I was doing.
Right, a one-stop shop with Steve Orich.
Yeah,
exactly. And so when you would need drums and percussion in this, would you sometimes use a live drum kit, or would you use your synth and your keyboards to...
I would just do it myself, because I could do it well enough, because I used to play drums, and I didn't have space in my studio to bring in a drum kit, so I just didn't bother with that. I did that when I went out, of course, in other studios and doing bigger jobs, but yeah.
I have a question about the Academy Awards.
Go ahead.
What year was it? What won Best Picture that year?
It was the year that Terry Garr was on, so I'm guessing it was probably 87. So there it is, 1986, 58th Academy Awards.
All right.
And then also when I was in LA, that's when I started getting back into doing theater. I did TV for a while, but I realized my first love was really theater. And I worked at the Pasadena Playhouse, and I conducted and orchestrated many shows there. And then some of them with as big as a 30-piece orchestra. So that was really also quite thrilling.
Of course. And you worked with Stephen Sondheim.
I did.
Yes, we're so sorry for your loss. It's still so fresh for everybody.
You know, before I knew him, it was just, you know, we all idolized him, and I studied his work, and I revered him. The story about how we met is actually quite interesting. I was hired by a friend back when I was in New York before I moved to LA to play rehearsals for this concert, which was going to be a Stephen Sondheim evening, and a concert and an album. And it was a lot of Broadway people, Judy Kay and Bob Gunton and George Hearn and Liz Calloway, really a nice section of performers. And actually, so we were rehearsing at my apartment, and they'd come there and I'd rehearse with everyone, and we were working on the music. It was several weeks of rehearsal. I get a call from the director, and he says, we need you to come to Mr. Sondheim's house tomorrow. And I said, okay. I said, what's up? He said, there's a special guest that's going to be performing, and they don't want the cast to know about it, so you need to come to his house to work with her. So I get invited to his house, and I come in and I meet him, and he says, come right this way. And I go into the room, and I'm at the piano here, and Steve is to my left. In front of me at the other, under the piano, was Paul Gemignani, and to my right was Angela Lansbury. And she was going to sing Send in the Clowns.
Oh.
But she did not know what key to sing it in.
Okay.
So I ended up playing it in all 12 keys on the piano on which he wrote the song.
Come on.
Unbelievable.
Unreal.
So because I was very good at transposing, I still am, but so I'd hear it, and then, but just, I mean, being in his presence. And then actually I ended up working with Angela every week, rehearsing like behind the scenes, and then at the concerts, like here she is, and came out and everyone was surprised, and that was great.
Oh, I wish.
And then I went to parties at his house. We also did another series of concerts in Philadelphia. So I did get to know him in that way. And it was, you know, just being in his presence and sensing the things that where someone would be singing something, and he would go over and he'd whisper 3 words in their ear, and it would change everything. He just, and also the whole time he always had the Times crossword puzzle, like he was doing that, and then also talking to the people at the same time, because that's who he was. Yeah.
Just always occupied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me show you something, because you had asked about this. Here's the score. Here's the original orchestration. Here's Act 1 with every note on there, hundreds of pages of the show. And yes, it was all done in finale. Okay. There was nothing written by hand here. That's Act 1. And then here's Act 2. I mean, just pages and pages of little dots.
Little dots.
Wow.
How many pages total?
Oh, I can't even count. Hundreds and hundreds. So first of all, let's go over here. This is a drawing that somebody did of the August Wilson Theater. I don't even remember where I got that from, but I have that. I think it was a gift from somebody.
Wow.
This is the
Oh,
2010 Helpman Award, which I have as a frame poster with all the graphics from the show, obviously.
Wow.
Over here, this was a gift of a Jersey Boys transistor radio. These are coasters. That's a
Coaster.
frame. That's
Meatballing.
that's from no, that's something else. That's from Bank of America. That's from the Chicago company. I have Jersey Boys cards, a deck of cards from Vegas.
oh.
These are poker chips from, or, chips from when we were in Vegas also. I've got, this is from the 10th anniversary. Lots of tchotchkes here. Ticket from closing night.
I
Lots
was
of other
there.
tickets. This you may have seen someplace else. This is the gold record.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Oh my goodness.
And then you can see on there.
Presented to Steve Orich to commemorate
The RIAA certified sales of more than 500,000 copies. We thought that was amazing. And then it went platinum.
Awesome.
And then this is the platinum record to certify for 1 million copies of the album.
You sell 1 million records. See how
Yeah, you handle it. Exactly.
Exactly. There's an artist in New York, Justin Robertson, they call Squigs, that he does a lot of. So he's an old friend of mine from LA. So after we opened on Broadway, he made this for me, which is me in front of the Four Seasons right there.
I love Squigs.
Yes. Nice goatee.
Yes. Oh, well, yeah, it was when my hair was a little bit darker. This is the Grammy from us winning the Grammy album. There was only one Grammy that Bob got, but it says for in recognition of your participation as orchestrator on the Grammy-winning recording of Jersey Boys. This is my Tony nomination.
Wow.
Best orchestrations for Jersey Boys. And then this is something special. This was an opening night gift from Bob and Frankie. So you probably can't tell, it's this magnificent burled wood box, custom made. And when you open it up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
How special is that?
That's so beautiful.
So I know that Bob actually went to Italy or sent it to somebody in Italy where he had it made. Now, let's see, how do I switch back?
Thank you for showing us around. And oh my
sure.
God, but that box, my dad actually had a similar one. I haven't thought about that.
The music box. Oh, one other thing to show you that's not Jersey Boys. This was a gift from Steve Sondheim, and the date is the date of the concert that we did, and it's a big brass paperweight. So
that's my mom's birthday.
Oh.
Wow, not 83 though.
Not 83. No. Sorry, March 3rd.
No, that's okay. Yes, so that's just another talk about Steve Sondheim.
Steve and Steve.
Aw.
Oh, can you tell? I know you were telling me a little bit about it, but can you tell us again about the? Can you tell us about the poster, about them standing?
Oh yeah, sure. What I was saying is that they shot the picture for the poster before we'd actually even started rehearsals for Broadway, and Daniel and Bobby and Christian were wearing their suits from La Jolla. John Lloyd came in and he hadn't done it at La Jolla because David Noronha had, and he was wearing someone else's suit. So if you look at the poster, the pants are too long on him. They're all buckled on the bottom just for yes. So that was the reason for that. And also, the concept was, besides obviously the dawn picture of them facing upstage, was that a few years before, the producers had been on Broadway, the show The Producers, with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick, and they had their big posters with their names on them, and everybody saw blah, blah, blah. And when they left the show and their faces were no longer on the poster, the show sort of started to decline. So they figured, we don't want that to happen. We don't want it to be dependent on any performer. So that's why they didn't want to show anyone's face in this.
We needed to hear that.
Right?
I was always curious about the poster. Thank you. Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about putting together the film this past summer?
Sure,
Whatever
you're
you
allowed
can
to
talk
talk about,
about.
sure. Well, to tell you the truth, and you may want to eliminate this part, I didn't have to do anything on it because they basically used all the original Broadway charts.
Broadway,
So-
okay.
Right. So it was the exact Broadway show. So I went to Cleveland. I was there for the weekend. I was there for the shoot. I was thrilling to see everybody and to see the production. And it was just an incredible experience, but I didn't do any new work on it. It was just, thank you. Here are my old charts, and there they are.
Right.
Because we asked because when we talked to Clara, she told us that it was because when we talked to Clara Siglarova, she told, because the Vegas production was arguably like the biggest one in terms of the
Yes.
size of the
Yes.
set. She said that they used more of that set design than the Broadway one.
Right. I don't know any of that.
Okay, no. So I asked
Yeah.
because I was interested to because I know you had mentioned that you've had to adjust the orchestration over the years, because as you mentioned in London, you had to
Right.
split the guitar book into two.
Right.
I
For
was-
this, we didn't have to make any changes. It was just because it was the original band.
Right.
And
Oh, the
so
original
they
band?
just,
Yeah.
yeah.
How special is that? Well, okay. So you got your Grammy. We're waiting for an Oscar now
Waiting for an Oscar.
and a Golden
There we
Globe.
go. I think this is a perfect time to wrap up this beautiful continue into the
The creative team
brilliance of the
minds.
creative team and the music team. And thank you so much, Steve Orich. This has been truly a full circle experience. I know for both of us, but especially for me.
I'm so glad. It was a pleasure for me also. As I said, it's been over 17 years since I started working on this show, and it's been a part of my life through all of that. And just remembering and revisiting those times, it's wonderful to share it with somebody new so you can, pass the story on.
Yes, of course. Well, that's why we're here. We're to archive everything, and I think this is really a great interview for a lot of beginners in music too. If they don't really know exactly where to start, this is a perfect inspiration for them. So
exactly.
thank you. So
There's one question that you had originally asked that we did not cover, which I will share with you now. You said, what's the difference between arranging and orchestrating?
Yes.
And there's a lot of overlap between arranging, orchestrating, and composing, because every arranger and every orchestrator I know are also composers, because you end up doing a little bit of all of those things when you do it. But basically the defining lines are: an arranger is more about the structure of the music, and an orchestrator is more about the actual notes that the instruments play. So that's where that is. However, when Ron was arranging the music, he was also composing different sections, and he would also make instrumentation suggestions. And then he'd give it to me, and then I would take it, but then I would also arrange and add other things. I would add, at the end of "Oh, What a Night," that brass figure, ba-da-da-da-da-da-ba-ba-da-da-da. That's something that I just came up with, just playing with it. So just, it was, again, it's a collaboration of everybody working in different ways and everyone adding their piece to it to make it a whole.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Like you said, theater is the best at collaborating.
Absolutely, unquestionably. Guys, this was so wonderful. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm happy to talk to you anytime, any place. Hit me up.
We'll meet you in Sarasota. Let's grab dinner.
We'll meet you in Sarasota.
Oh, for sure.
We'll share a pizza.
Absolutely. Please do.
Yes.
All right.
Let me know when you're
Salud,
here.
Steve.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.